So good evening. I'm Laurel Traynor, and I'm the director of the McMaster Institute for Music and the Mind. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to our 7th annual integrated lecture and concert. So the McMaster Institute for Music and the Mind has 3 main goals: to promote research in music cognition, to promote music education for all children, and to promote music in the community. It's a great pleasure for me to organize these events because they give us an opportunity to illustrate how these 3 goals are intertwined at the Institute. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of the people who worked on putting this event together. I don't have time to thank them all individually. There are over 20 volunteers who have worked very hard doing things from moving furniture to arranging for food. But I do need to single out 2 people. The first one is Andrea Unrau, who was the event coordinator, and she is the most organized and unflappable person I think that I know. And the second person is David Gary, who organized the music, so doing everything from choosing the appropriate selections to taking off one of the piano lids. So he really did everything. I'm also very happy that Dr. Gianni Parisi is here tonight to introduce our evening. Dr. Parisi is the Associate Dean of Research for the Faculty of Science at McMaster University. And we greatly appreciate the time and the effort that he puts in to help us accomplish our research goals. It is through the dedication of people like Dr. Parisi that McMaster builds its reputation for excellence and innovation. So please join me in welcoming Gianni Parisi.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 7th annual integrated lecture and concert sponsored by McMaster Institute for Music and the Mind. Admittedly, when I started my term as Associate Dean of Research, I knew very little about this institute. I was aware of the campus buzz about the institute, but I wasn't intimately aware of what this institute could accomplish. Through many conversations with Laurel and some of her colleagues, I came to realize what an important and impressive institute this is. The science of the Institute is quite unique. It's the kind of science that we can all relate to, that we can all understand. Perhaps most importantly, it's the kind of science that on occasions such as these can bring so many of us together and experience it. As a representative of the Faculty of Science, I'm proud to say we've supported this institute in the past and will continue to do so in the future. Laurel, don't get too excited. In the handbook for new administrators, it says I'm supposed to say that. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll follow through, but I'll do my best. This institute exemplifies what McMaster is famous for: excellence, innovation, and leading the world in research and education. We're excited to announce that in the coming weeks we should begin construction on a brand new facility for studying neuroscience and human performance. This will be a functioning small concert hall equipped with the latest state-of-the-art technology for manipulating acoustics and measuring brain responses from musicians and audience members as they engage in making music. This facility will be the first of its kind in the world. It will enable us to understand why music is so important to all of us. It will also enable research aimed at helping the hearing impaired, as well as other conditions such as autism and developmental coordination disorder. The McMaster Institute for Music and the Mind reaches across disciplines and allows us to witness a beautiful fusion of science and the arts. Nowhere is this fusion better demonstrated than in the innovative integrated lecture and concerts like the one we have in store for you this evening. Tonight's speaker is Dr. Stefan Koelsch from the Freie University in Berlin. He's a leading researcher in human communication and how this is accomplished in the brain. Over the past decade, Dr. Koelsch has published over 70 papers in top-notch journals, and his work on music is broad and influential. He's going to talk to us tonight about how the brain processes meaning in music. Musical meaning is a topic about which many have puzzled. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that music is the melody whose text is the world. Victor Hugo said, "Music expresses that which cannot be said, and on which it is impossible to be silent." Tonight we will learn about what modern neuroscience has to say about this topic. In the tradition of these events, Dr. Koelsch's lecture will be illustrated by wonderful music. We'll hear mezzo Margaret Bardot and David Gary and Laurel Trainer on flute. But to start, I'm delighted to welcome the internationally acclaimed piano duo, Elizabeth and Marcel Bergman. Please enjoy your evening.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Can you hear me? Is it still on? Yes, it is. Okay. All right. This was the Mephisto Waltz by Franz Liszt, who was born 200 years ago and died 125 years ago. And Liszt tells a narrative with this waltz. And the narrative goes that Mephistopheles, so a devil, and Faust, who's like one of the main characters of this piece, pass by a wedding feast in a village inn, and Mephistopheles induces Faust to enter and take part in the festivities. And after they entered the inn, Mephistopheles snatches the fiddle from the hands of the rather lethargic fiddle player and draws from it indescribably seductive and intoxicating strains. The amorous Faust whirls about with a full-blooded village beauty in a wild dance. They waltz in mad abandon out of the room, into the open, away into the woods. The sounds of the fiddle grow softer and softer, and the nightingale warbles its love-laden song. And then Faust and the beauty engage in amorous activities that I am actually not allowed to describe in more detail because we have some children and adolescents here. And about 45 seconds later, the piece ends. So pieces such as this, where music tells a narrative, are referred to as program music. And program music usually provides many nice examples of so-called extra-musical sign qualities. An extra-musical sign quality, that means that meaning can emerge from the reference of a musical sign to an object or a concept, that is, to something outside the musical world. And in the first part of this lecture concert, the musicians and I will provide a number of examples for different extra-musical sign qualities. So, for example, the Mephistopheles waltz starts with Mephistopheles tuning a violin. And this is illustrated or portrayed by the fifth in the piano and some grace notes that kind of mimic that wow, 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 wow. And this is going to be demonstrated to us now. So those among you who knows how tuning of a violin sounds probably recognize that this sounded like violin tuning here. And then Mephistopheles goes up a staircase from which he begins to play in a rather devilishly or demonically way. And the ascending of Mephistopheles, going up the stairs, is portrayed by this motive here. So Mephistopheles didn't hurt his leg, though. So the ascending interval steps kind of portray the steps of the stairs. So the use of such iconic signs or of iconic sign quality in music is one form of so-called tone painting. And the other form of tone painting is the use of indexical sign quality. An indexical musical meaning emerges from musical signals indicating the inner state of an individual. That is, in contrast to iconic meaning, indexical musical meaning refers to signs that do not signal the presence of something that is inherent in the signal itself. So, for example, like smoke, indicating the presence of fire. That's the famous example by Charles Saunders Peirce. And in Western music, indexical musical meaning usually emerges from the imitation of expressions signaling the psychological state of an individual, such as an emotion, a mood, or an intention. And by the way, imitation of such emotional expressions is the other form of tone painting. So such expressions are inherently related to action. For example, vocalizations are produced by the vocal apparatus, so like a happy voice or a sad voice, or musical signals mimicking a happy or a sad voice. And other action-related phenomena are gestures by the use of skeletal muscles or facial expressions with facial muscles. So the waltz has actually a number of such passages where a certain emotional expression can be recognized in the music. And here's just one example in which the music expresses passion, longing, and wanting. So now notably, we can recognize the musical expression of an emotion without necessarily feeling that emotion ourselves. However, often we do feel emotional responses to music. Often they correspond to what is expressed in the music. And these feelings also have meaning for us. And I refer to this meaning emerging from an individual's emotional response to music as emotional musicogenic meaning. And this meaning is important because here music conveys meaning by evoking a feeling sensation in another individual that bears resemblance to the feeling sensation of the producer of the musical signal. And this is different to words, because I can never know whether you and I actually mean the same thing when you or I say, I am happy, or I am very happy, or I'm having fun, or any other word that's related to an emotional state. Such statements are different from sentences such as, this is a microphone, or this is a laptop computer, because you can also see that this is a microphone and that this is a laptop computer. So you can actually verify or falsify the use of the words by myself. And that is different from feeling states and words that I use to express my feeling states, because you cannot look into my head and see or judge what I actually mean when I use a specific word. However, if music evokes a feeling sensation in a listener that bears resemblance to the feeling sensation of the producer, then this emotional musicogenic meaning can actually be more specific than the meaning information that is conveyed simply by a word. Now, the recognition of an expression of emotion through extra musical indexical sign quality and the experience of an emotion, which might give rise to musicogenic emotional meaning, might correspond with each other. And of course, they do not always or necessarily correspond with each other. During the next 3 songs, you are invited to try and experience yourself whether the emotion expressed by the music evokes an emotion in you or not, and whether the expressed emotion corresponds with the emotion that you might feel. So the first song we are going to hear is Give Him His Orchid from Benjamin Britten's opera The Rape of Lucretia. And in this opera, the decently married Lucretia has been raped by the prince Tarquinius, and this song expresses her devastation, her anger and pain, and due to the violence that she suffered and the loss of purity and innocence, which drives her lunatic. And actually, at the end of the opera, she kills herself. So giving away the orchid is a metaphor for loss of purity and innocence. The second song is Del Cabello Más Sutil by Fernando Obrador, and that's a love song and an expression of loving and longing. And the text, the English translation goes, of the hair most delicate that you have in your braids, I have to make a chain to bring you to my side. A jug in your house, darling, I would like to be, to kiss you on the mouth when you went to drink. Ah. And the third song is Climb Every Mountain from the musical The Sound of Music by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. And this song has a strong, heroic, optimistic character. And moreover, this song also nicely illustrates, let's see here. That song nicely illustrates that in addition to the indexical musical sign quality, the song also uses iconic sign quality during climbing up the mountain, being portrayed by a continuous rise in pitch. So now we're going to hear Benjamin Britten's Give Him His Orchid from The Rape of Lucretia, Obrador's Del Cabello Más Sutil, and Climb Every Mountain by Roger Hammerstein.
And Lucretia's shame. Give him this orchid and tell him a Roman harlot sent it, and tell him to ride straight to her. Tell him to come home. Go, go, go. Wait. Tell the messenger to take my love. Yes, give my love to the messenger. Give my love to the stable boy and the coachman too. And hurry, 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 hurry. For all men love the chaste Lucretia. Flowers bring to every ear the same perfection.
sorry. It's just we can do a photo staging later. Wow. There's something I wanted also to tell about indexical musical sign quality, which is that interestingly, this sign quality can be understood universally. So that is, if a piece of music sounds happy because it mimics happy vocalizations and gestures, then every human around the world, apparently, can understand this expression of emotion. And one of my former PhD students, Thomas Fritz, investigated this by presenting happy and sad and scary pieces of Western tonal music to peasants who lived in northern Cameroon in an area where there was no electricity, and they were living in a rather isolated way, so that probably none of the participants of the experiment had ever heard any Western music in their life before. So he played these different tunes to them and asked them to point to the emotional expression that would fit with the emotional expression of the music. And the solid bar graphs here show the results of the Mafa. That's the name of this people in northern Cameroon. The small dotted line shows chance level. And as you can see in this figure, is that the Mafa were able, clearly above chance, to recognize the emotional expression of the music. And this indicates that part of emotional expression conveyed by Western tonal music can be understood universally, similar to the facial expression of emotion, which can be understood universally, and also to the affective prosody, so that that is the expression of emotions in the human voice. However, the dashed bar graphs show the results from Western listeners, and they were, or they had an even better performance than the Mafa participants, which shows us that cultural experience also shapes the recognition or the ability to recognize such emotions. Now the next piece will be Capriccio d'après la bal masque by Francis Poulenc. Here we can hear carnival rhythms and playfulness in the opening, a bit of melancholy in the middle section, and return to the kind of jerky rhythms of the beginning. However, I'm actually not going to say much more about this piece, because I think that it's also nice to simply listen to music for a change without constantly thinking about its meaning. So I've talked now about iconic and indexical extra-musical meaning. One class of extra-musical sign quality is still missing, and that is symbolic extra-musical sign quality. And instead of making a lot of words about it, I'm just giving you examples. So now please listen to this musical signal. What does it say? Anybody recognize that? Perhaps we need a little bit more. Yeah? What was it? Marineland, yes. We have an even better one. Pillows, cutlery, mattresses. Okay, so those who know the commercial, I don't, by the way. Because in Germany they don't sell mattresses, I mean from this, it's a mattress company, isn't it? From this company, I mean. We have another one. Apparently this is also from a commercial. Which one is it? Yeah, apparently there's a commercial here in North America. Exactly, British Airways. And again, I don't know this commercial, so it doesn't mean British Airways to me. For me it has like the original association that Leo Delibes wanted to express, namely blossoms and flowers. And of course, it's not a mere coincidence that British Airways used this song and not, for example, the angry song from the abused Lucretia. Although, after flying across the Atlantic with BA, you sometimes feel that had they used Lucretia's song in their commercial, it would have been probably a little bit more truthful. But anyway, I believe we have one more. This is my favorite one because this one I actually know myself. Who knows that one? Star Trek. Yes. So, as I already kind of alluded to, only those who learned the symbolic sign qualities of these musical signals know what these signals mean. That is, symbolic musical meaning emerges from arbitrary extra-musical associations, and that's different than iconic and indexical musical meaning. So if you do not know what a musical signal or a word means, then you do not understand the symbolic meaning of that signal. Okay. Now one could, of course, ask whether the neural mechanisms of meaning processing in the brain that are activated for the processing of musical meaning, or more specifically of extra-musical meaning, are actually the same as those activated for the processing of meaning information during language perception. That is, do our brains really process the extra-musical meaning of musical information similar to the processing of the meaning of words? And in order to investigate this, we used a classical electrophysiological marker of semantic information processing. And this goes back to a classic experiment from Marta Kutas and Stephen Hilliard, in which they used electroencephalography, EEG, They recorded event-related brain potentials, so electric brain responses to single words. And in this case, I want to draw your attention to the electric brain responses elicited by the last words of a sentence. So for example, think of a sentence like, he spread the warm bread with socks. And the word socks is semantically, let's say, a bit unusual, unless you have very strange breakfast habits. But I assume you don't, so each one of you would have shown this so-called N400 response, just now when I read this word, to the semantically unrelated word. So you can compare this, for example, with the electric brain response to the last word of a sentence like, it was his first day at work. Work is semantically related, so that's fine for the brain. And you see that the dashed line shows this so-called N400 brain response. It's a negative potential that is maximal at around 400 milliseconds after the onset of the word. And negative is plotted up here, as it is often common in ERP research. Don't bother about that. That's just a convention. So a couple of years ago, we wondered how we could test whether we could investigate or test whether the brain processes music semantic information similar to language semantic information. And in order to do so, we set up this semantic priming experiment. And in some of the conditions, we had normal language conditions in which a target word, here staircase, was semantically either related or unrelated to a preceding sentence. So for example, if subjects heard, he was going up to the next floor, and then saw the word staircase on the screen, then that was semantically related. However, if they read the sentence, if they heard the sentence, he smelled the scent of the flower, and were then presented with the word staircase on the screen, then they showed again an N400 response to this semantically unrelated word, as you can see in the upper right panel indicated by the arrow. Now, the clue of this experiment was that we also added conditions in which the target word, or the meaning of the target word, was not primed by a sentence, but by a musical excerpt. And actually, one of the stimuli was a part of the Mephisto waltz that we heard in the very beginning. So now, imagine that you were a subject of this experiment. You were asked to look at the screen and at the fixation cross, and then you hear this musical stimulus. Keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. Staircase, okay? And we measure the brain response that you show while reading that word. Of course, participants of our study, unlike you, didn't know that Liszt specifically wanted to express this with his music. They just heard the musical interval steps there. Now, in another trial that could occur, even some trials before or some trials after that trial, they were presented with this excerpt, just a second. So again, please have a look at the fixation cross. Then you hear this musical stimulus. And then keep looking. All right. And again, we measured the electric brain response to reading that word. So the word in both cases was physically identical in all different trials. We did not only use these two excerpts, but dozens of different excerpts. And again, we compared the brain response to elicited by the word when it was semantically unrelated and related to the previous musical excerpt. And as you can see here in the lower panel, the words again elicited this N400 response when they were semantically unrelated to the previous musical information. And this showed us that music can prime representations of meaningful concepts in our brains in a very similar way than sentences and language can. And in a number of follow-up experiments, we and other groups showed that this also works with very, very short musical excerpts. So for example, Daniele Schön showed this with excerpts that were just 1 second long. Or we did experiments in which we just used one single chord. That was, for example, pleasant, unpleasant, major, minor, and so forth, to prime the meaning of a word. Or just a single tone that sounded, for example, round, or warm, or colorful, or chocolatey, and measured brain responses to subsequent words. And also, you can swap the experimental paradigm there, use words as prime stimuli, and see whether the chord, or the musical excerpt, or the tone also evokes an N400 response. And these results showed that this is actually the case. So not only words can elicit N400 responses, also musical information can elicit this very brain response. Again, indicating that the brain can process musical information semantically very similar to as it can process linguistic information. Now, the last piece of the first part of this concert lecture is Eggs and Toast from Cats in the Kitchen by Philip Bimstein. That's apparently his real name. And in this piece, environmental sounds, namely kitchen sounds, are manipulated and combined in a meaningful way. And by doing so, these environmental sounds become music. And I expect that some of you, at least, will find this piece quite funny and amusing, although the music does not necessarily express such emotions, which is a nice example for emotional musicogenic meaning without the necessary presence of indexical musical meaning. So. Funny, isn't it? Great. Wow.
Isn't it rich? And
So, welcome everybody to the second part of this lecture concert. The second part is on intramusical meaning. And intramusical meaning refers to meaning that emerges from structural references, that is, from the reference of one musical element or a group of musical elements to another musical element or another group of musical elements. So intramusical meaning emerges only from the musical world itself. It doesn't reference to anything outside the musical world. And I will give you some examples for this. So for example, in the song we've just heard, the chords were not only in one key, for example, but there were several harmonic progressions that were quite unusual and unexpected. And in this way, certain chord functions suddenly point to the previous musical context in a way that is, for example, surprising for us, and that intramusical meaning emerges from these references. We will give you one example from the song we've just heard. Yeah. Could you play the sequence once in a fashion where it would be expected or more expected, and once where it would be more unexpected?
Yeah, this is actually how we wrote it. This is the more unexpected one. Right? This would be.
So let me give you another example. Actually, we had one more. That was this song. It begins with Twinkle. Okay, could you play just the last chord for itself? Now, could you play cadence in this key? See, it's a regular chord. It's a normal major chord. The only thing that makes it sound weird or odd is the previous musical context. And we did experiments investigating whether meaning actually emerges from such intramusical references that we could measure in the brain. And in order to do so, we didn't use Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but we kind of boiled down harmonic progressions to the essentials and came up, for example, with sequences such as the one that are shown here. And Marcel is now going to play the upper one. Okay, and now the lower one, which is actually the one that you have in your program. Okay, so again, the last chord is a major chord, so there's nothing peculiar about the chord itself. It's the reference to the previous harmonic context that makes this chord sound a little bit odd. And here are electric brain responses elicited by such chords. The blue line indicates the electric brain response to the regular chord, and the red line indicates the electric brain response to the irregular chord, and the black line indicates the difference between the two. The electric brain responses are shown for 1 second, which was the duration of the last chord. Again, negative is up. And as you can see, when you look at this black line, there are two potentials, two electric brain responses elicited by the irregular chords. The first one is a so-called early right anterior negativity, or just ERAN. And the second one is a later negativity, to which we refer to as the N5. These both potentials are indicated by the arrows here. So what we think is that the N5 potential reflects in part processes of intramusical meaning. Now, how we can actually investigate this? How can we test whether this brain response has anything to do with the processing of meaning? Well, in order to investigate this, we designed an experiment in which participants did not only perceive chords, but read words of sentences at the same time. And the last word of each sentence was semantically either related or strongly related to the previous sentence, or less strongly related in semantic terms to the previous words of the sentence. So, for example, if you have a sentence like, he drinks the cold, then after the words, he drinks the cold, at least if you're a German, and the experiment was carried out in Germany, there really is just one word that can conclude this sentence in a meaningful way, and that is beer. Now, if you compare this to the sentence, he sees the cold, then basically anything which can be cold and which can be seen can occur at the last position of the sentence. So the semantic close probability is considerably lower for the sentence, he sees the cold beer, as compared to he drinks the cold beer. And this manipulation in semantic or meaningful close probability evokes again an N400 response. So the N400 that we heard about in the first part of this lecture concert is modulated by this semantic close probability. Now let's come again back to what we've seen before, namely the potentials elicited by the irregular chord functions, by these weird sounding chords, but in particular to this N5 potential indicated there by the arrow. So here we specifically wanted to test whether this potential is interested in the semantic properties of a word that has to be processed at the same time as the chord. So in other words, can this N5 potential be modulated when the last word of a sentence is semantically related or less related to the previous context? So, to put it in other words, is the processing of intramusical meaning as reflected in the N5 influenced by the semantic processing of a word that's processed at the same time as the chord? And as it turns out, this is actually the case. I would like to draw your attention here to the middle panel in the red square. And the dark line that you see corresponds to the black difference waveform that you see here. That's to which the E-run and the N5 point. So that's what happens when the last word of the sentence, together with the chord, is semantically related. If the last word is semantically unrelated, then this N5 potential is reduced, as you can see in the red line. And this modulation of this N5 potential indicates to us that this potential is somehow related to the processing of meaning information. So that means we have so far covered two aspects of musical meaning that show different neural signatures in the brain. Processing of extra-musical meaning, that is meaning referring to the extra-musical world of concepts, gestures, objects, and so forth. And this processing is reflected in the N400 brain response, as shown in the first part of this lecture concert. The N400 elicited by musical events, as shown, for example, by the semantic priming experiment that I showed to you. And processing of intramusical meaning, that is meaning that lies exclusively within the context of the music itself, appears to be reflected in the N5. And the relation between N5 and the processing of meaning information is indicated by the interaction of this brain electric response with language semantic information processing. Now, with regard to musicogenic meaning, I already spoke about emotional musicogenic meaning in the first part. Now I would like to talk about physical musicogenic meaning. And that refers to physical activity of individuals while experiencing music. Because when experiencing music, individuals tend to move to music, not only when they play an instrument or when they play the music, but also when they listen to the music and, of course, if they dance to music. And this movement during music listening can be clapping or tapping, foot tapping, head nodding or head banging, swaying, etc., conducting, whatever you like. That is, individuals tend to show physical activity in response to and in synchrony with music. And merely the fact that an individual shows such activity has meaning for the individual. It's not meaningless. And in addition, the way in which an individual moves along to music expresses meaning information. So these movements are composed by the individual. And in a social situation, that is, when more than one individual moves to or plays music, then meaning might also emerge from joint, coordinated activity. For example, an action-related effect that becomes apparent in music based on an asynchronous pulse, that is, a pulse to which we can easily tap to or dance, is that individuals kind of synchronize and coordinate their movements to the external musical pulse. And in effect, this leads in a group of individuals to coordinated physical activity. And notably, humans are one of the very few species that are capable of synchronizing their movements to an external beat. And in addition, humans are unique in that they can understand other individuals as intentional agents and share their intentionality and act jointly to achieve a common goal. Now, in order to experience this meaning quality now, I would actually like all of you to stand up. And now we are going to play a piece, and I invite all of you to somehow move along to the music, to somehow show some physical activity to the music. And those of you who are very shy may just tap their foot. The Germans and the British among you particularly. And the others may, do whatever they feel like. We are not going to turn the lights off, but still. Okay, please. Nice. All right, very last dimension of musical meaning is what I refer to as personal musical meaning. So feeling sensations evoked by a musical piece of music or some musical information, so let's say musicogenic emotional information, can have a personal relevance and thus meaning for an individual, in that, for example, they can touch or somehow move the individual more than feeling sensations evoked by another piece of music or by another band or by another composer. So this is in part due to inter-individual differences in personality, both on the side of the recipient and on the side of the producer, differences in preference, etc., etc. So due to the fact that an individual has a personality, be it the receiver or the producer, and that personalities differ between individuals, there's also inter-individual difference among receivers in the particular preference for or connection with a particular producer of music. That is, music-evoked emotions can also be related to one's inner self, sometimes leading to the experience that one recognizes oneself in the music in a very special, very personal way. So now we have covered the different dimensions of musical meaning. In order to get full course credit, you should be able to kind of recite these different dimensions then after this talk. Now, Elisabeth and Marcel Bergmann will now present some more pieces of Beethoven's, Bernstein's. What a slip of the tongue. Of Bernstein's West Side Story, of course. So I will not talk about any processes related to the meaning of that music anymore now. Also, again, to emphasize that we don't necessarily and constantly have to think about musical meaning, but can just enjoy music and let our brains actually do the rest. However, perhaps some of you will listen differently to music after what they've had experienced here today. And I do hope that I have convinced all of you that music truly is not meaningless. Thank you very much. sehr gefreut. Ja, super. Dankeschön. Super, das war wirklich ganz toll.